it's not that people should get out of the relationship, it's that people don't stand up for principles that are necessary for any union to survive in the long run.
We are back with another episode of the Take Two podcast. And this week, we are talking about something a little bit different than what we normally do, relationships. Join us as we talk to Dr. Stan Tatkin. I would say in the realm of psychology, few individuals have made a profound impact on the field of couples therapy like Dr. Tatkin has. He is a multi-time best-selling author, clinician, researcher, teacher, and developer of PACT, which is the psychobiological approach to couples therapy. He has emerged over the years as a true pioneer in the realm of relationship science. Why? It's because he integrates developmental neuroscience, arousal regulation, and attachment therapy. On this episode, we are getting real about relationships. And listen, if anybody knows me, you know that I love relationships. I love people. But the reality of it is we all have relationships, whether it be intimate relationships, whether it be relationships with our children or with our parents, whether it be friendships, whether it be relationships at work. They are core to being human. And we all have them in some way, shape, or form. Yet we know that they are hard, and making them last is even harder. So on today's conversation, it's going to be gritty, it's honest, and Rickus and I share some of those triggers that we experience in our own lives. But Dr. Stan provides tactical ways to identify and overcome triggers, which often lead to conflict. And he shows us how to improve communication to achieve better outcomes. We explore everything about relationships, from cultivating secure, functioning relationships to creating a culture of shared power and purpose, to finding the balance between independence and interdependence. Are you ready to explore how we can be happier and healthier in all of our relationships? Let's take two. You are obviously an expert on human behavior and couples relationships. And then I know that you've taught around the world on what you call functioning relationships and principles of behavior. And then you developed PAC, which is the psychobiological approach to couples therapy. And, those all sound like very big words. So if you could put that into just layman's terms about what does it actually mean? And then I'd also love to understand, what moved you or inspired you to end up doing the work that you're doing and conducting the research that you have in this field.
Sure. Well, psychobiology is really the study of the brain and the body. So, but also infant brain development and development of the brain and the body throughout the lifespan. So it's a developmental theory that incorporates not just neurology or neurobiology, but also the autonomic nervous system. So arousal systems, when we get aroused, when we get relaxed, and then also attachment. So attachment is the safety and security system that we experience from birth, life, with our most important relationships. And then there's a lot of other things that are involved in psychobiology as well. So I got involved in this in my study of the brain, my study of science, and through mentorships. And I was originally interested in prevention, working with infants. And so I studied infants for a while. And I found that mother-infant pairs, father-infant pairs would not come into the clinic very much for prevention. So I switched to adult pair bonding. And I found that working with couples, which is pretty much, it's not exactly the same because it's a symmetrical relationship in adulthood as opposed to asymmetric in childhood. But pretty much the rules for secure attachment are the same in adulthood as they are in childhood. And so I transferred everything over to couples. And I found that I could help children that way. So I'm still in the prevention field.
Okay. And I have to ask, I heard earlier you said, oh, you're just a drummer sitting in front of us. So were you a drummer and you have somehow transitioned from being a drummer into this?
I was a drummer since I can remember. Since I was 6, I played. And then I was a professional drummer up until around 26, I quit. And this is a family. My brother and I were in the business, and then I went through my lost years, thinking, what am I going to do? I'm just a musician. And I fell into, among other things, acting and directing. And then I went into my schooling and didn't look back. And I've been bringing basically music and acting and directing into my work. So that's kind of the benefit of being old. I get to fold everything in that I like.
Maybe we can talk a little bit about relationships then. Obviously there are romantic relationships, there are relationships with your kids, with your parents, there's friendships, there's working relationships. For something that is so necessary in our day-to-day lives, why is it that they're so difficult?
Relationships?
Yeah.
Because of our species. We're human primates, and human primates have a storied history. A lot of it's sordid, right? We're very, we're wonderful. I mean, we're the only ones on the planet that we know of that can predict and plan, rotate objects in our head in 3D, and are able to make up things that don't exist. All right. We can create things like relationships. Relationships don't exist except in our heads. We create hopefully a shared mythology of what our relationship is, which is something that I'm pitching, because if the relationship mythology isn't the same, then we're operating under different ideas, and that could cause a lot of trouble. So there are lots of reasons. Human beings by nature, whether we like it or not, this is proven, are warlike and aggressive and moody and fickle and opportunistic.
Moody, not at all.
Opportunistic. And remember that word, opportunistic. If we can get away with it, we will. We have an important figure in our country that demonstrates that. So we're easily influenced by groups. We can change our affiliation on a dime. And we're xenophobic, racist. We otherize. Been doing that from the very beginning. We'll probably do that until we evolve, if that ever really happens, because we've evolved very little in that sense. So we otherize anybody, as Yuval Harari says, too familiar to ignore and too different to live with. And that could be our partners, could be our kids. So, we're difficult animals, annoying, pain in the ass animals that are disappointing and aggravating and hard to live with. And yet we need each other. And so we have the attachment glue, which is a biological mandate that says, I can't quit you. And nature built that in so we would be the pack animals and the herd animals that we are and stick together. However, it can also make us stick together when we shouldn't. And we confuse the attachment biology for love, but it isn't. It's actually an existential matter from birth, that our survival is at stake. When we lose a primary attachment figure, we start to feel like we're dying. And that is for most of us. There are some that don't experience that, but they're outliers.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because we were both previously married and we're both divorced. And it's one of the things that you said about, sometimes because of this attachment and somewhat dependency on another person, even when you shouldn't stay in these types of relationships, you do, right? And I know for myself, and it's more speaking from personal experience, I think it was like a comfortable thing because you're so comfortable that it's just easier to do than to confront having to start something new.
Well, there is something about not starting something new that's also important. If I've been with someone for 10 years, 20 years, I may want to tear down the structure, and that's what I recommend. But keep the person. And the reason for that, if that person is interested, we have a lot of data on what not to do. So we're known knowns in that sense. We know what doesn't work, what we can never do again. Whereas with a new person, it could take up to 3 years to actually know who we're dealing with. That's because it takes a long time to get to know somebody. and what they'll do under certain circumstances. So there is a benefit, but it's not that people should get out of the relationship. It's that people don't stand up for principles that are necessary for any union to survive in the long run. Terms and conditions, shared power, shared authority, that in this together, we have to co-construct this thing called a relationship. It's not something we just assume will happen. It doesn't. We have to co-construct it, coming up with our ethics, our morals, our principles, how we're going to govern each other. Governance is really important. I have to be able to stop you from doing things that are damaging, as you need to stop me from doing things that are damaging, and push you and push me, right? We give each other permission to do that because we're both pointing in the same direction. So we have to have a shared sense of purpose and a shared vision. All unions across time have had to do that. Couples are the only union that doesn't think about that. It thinks about love. And that's a mistake. It has to be based on terms and conditions. What are we going to do? And what are we never going to do? So say us both. And so if you can stand up and say, hey, that's not going to work. You've got to play fair and just with me as I got to with you. You can't do that. I can't do that. So you can't. If somebody can't stand up for the principles that would uphold a union over the long run, that's the attachment system that I'm talking about. I'm afraid to do that because you will walk away. And secure functioning individuals will stand up for the principles of their union, even with the threat that the other person may say no deal, because they believe that that's the right and best thing to do.
So, and I think one of the things, and maybe you can talk about this a bit, because we very much believe in creating this shared purpose and vision and values. And it's a big part, like we talked about earlier, of our lives. But can you, especially in the beginning of a relationship, right, where I think there's lots of lust and excitement, can you really authentically and even with integrity talk about these things and create these things at the start of a relationship? And if not, then what is the point to start doing so?
Well, in the beginning, you're vetting each other, right? Nature doesn't really care about relationships, which is why you're hot and heavy for each other, right? That's why we're kind of crazy. We're on drugs, and so we're on all these neuropeptides and groovy drugs that make us be super heroes and super sexual, right? And when those drugs go away, we come back to baseline. So nature wants us to continue the species. After that, we're on our own. So that's why in the beginning, it is what it is, right? We're not very good at vetting in the beginning, which is why we have our friends and our family, social network to do that for us. That's the way it's always been. And we ask them to, right? Sniff us. Do you like the way I am with this person? Am I myself? Do you like this person? What do you think? Are we genuine? And as long as I'm open to that feedback from young people, old people, male, female, doesn't matter. Actually does, a wide swath. Then I can cross-check my where I'm already attached and kind of my judgment is poor. I can cross-check it with that. And that's a good thing to do. But eventually we're going to start to vet each other for what we believe a good relationship or a perfect relationship should be. And that's the other thing that's really important. Not the person, but what should the relationship be? Should be absolutely safe and secure for both of us. And should we guarantee that? Should we maintain through purpose-centered principles, being partners for life and not just tools, not just parents, right? In other words, we're building this thing, this house, this plane, whatever the structure called a relationship, and we're putting ourselves at the top, because if everything and everyone depends on our being okay, then we have to. right? You and I, or you and your partner, have to ensure that you are in good order because you're creating new things. You're solving problems, not solving each other, hopefully. You are, you have to be a good team. It's a team sport. And so the minute you're not a good team, things break down and you're not as good parents. You're lower resources. You have lower resources and greater interpersonal stress, which means bad for your health. Everything is going to run smoothly if this relationship is running smoothly, because life is not easy, right? But the two of you should be. The relationship should be easy. So it's a constant work in progress, a practice to eliminate threat, to increase collaboration and cooperation, especially under stress, because this is the thing. The two of you have to be a two-person psychological system of we and us, working collaboratively and cooperatively. Otherwise, you can't work. Does that make sense? It's like a potato sack race. And so you have to maintain that at all times. And that's very, very hard to do for me, for everybody, when under stress. We tend to revert to a one-person system of I, me, my, and you. And that is where we become unfriendly, and that's where we become threatening to the other person and they to us. This is the human condition. Everybody will fall into these traps. No exceptions. Doesn't matter where you're from or trauma history. It doesn't matter. We're all incredibly difficult to deal with if we start to feel that little bit of threat from the other person, that I'm being attacked, I'm being criticized, I'm not good enough, anything. Your raise of your eyebrow, what does that mean? Why are you doing that? And I'm taking that cue from all the memory in my life. Memory is indiscriminate, right? We're operating constantly by memory. That's all we do is memory, memory, memory. Very little of our day is actually spent thinking critically. That's because we're energy conserved animals. So we do the least amount necessary. Therefore, we have to really rise to the occasion and understand the human condition and be better than the off the line factory human primate, which check your 2-year-old, that's pretty much us.
So I'll be very interested in understand if how kids get raised, does that influence how they act in relationships later on? So
how are kids?
Gen X, Gen Y, because my experience is, the way I grew up, very, very different to how kids are growing up today, and how I got taught, and the power relationship that there was between my father and myself versus what there is today, between me and my daughters, it's very, very different. So I just wonder if that then changes the way that relationships are set up.
There are forces that we that are bigger than us, like the larger system. The larger system is our culture that's constantly changing with each generation, and it's just when you get, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 68. My wife and I are 68, and you begin to know what our parents went through when you start to not understand some of the humor from the new generation, and also some of the trends. You really start to feel, okay, I'm definitely not inheriting this earth anymore. I'm definitely a dinosaur, and I'm on my way out. Right? There's just a strong feeling about that. But your kids are actually observing the two of you. And this is what I try to tell parents, is that your relationship independently with your children, yes, is important. But just as important is what they see and what they're constantly watching between the two of you, which is basically theater, right? They're learning from the actors how to deal with relationships. What are the relationship ethics? How do we fall on our swords and be humble? How do we admit our wrongs? How do we make up? How do we repair? How do we treat the opposite sex? Right? And they're crossing it with something called social referencing. So I'm watching mom to see how to feel about dad. You're under stress. I'm watching dad to see how to feel about mom. And if parents don't realize that, they're going to say what to do, but they're going to show something else. That's why we want the couple to be really good at dealing with each other, really good handlers at each other, right? I'm very good at you. I'm an expert on you. You're an expert on me. Kids can see that. They also become experts on their parents as well. And so if you think of the family as a petri dish, a kind of representation of the world, of dealing with civilization, I'm learning how to fight by watching the two of you fight in front of me, if you're doing it well, and how to make up if you're doing that in front of me too. So it really is a top-down issue of watching and learning how the two of you are interacting. We forget this, or some people don't know this.
That's very interesting. And you know, I just wonder, because I'm a bit strange when it comes to these type of things. I always think of it from a business perspective. And so I think of relationships, and inside a team, that you need to build a high-performing team. You're basically building relationships between individuals, and the individuals as a cohort need to have a shared purpose. And so I was just, you know, is that, can you apply your thinking to that type of
Yes.
as well?
Yes. So I'll tell people, if the two of you, if two of you were an ice skating team, right? Ice skating duo. You're different people. You're probably irritating and annoying like me, like everybody else. That's so what? And you have your strengths and your weaknesses. But what ties you together, what makes you the same, is you both want to win. You both have a purpose of being the best ice skaters you can possibly be. And you have a vision of winning. So that's what makes you the same and makes you agree. And it dissolves your differences. That's what has done it and continues to do it throughout our time on the planet, right? You would work differently than most couples would, right? You would work differently because you have a purpose and a vision that dissolves your differences, and that focuses you on the prize, and therefore you work together. But let's say you're in the foxhole together, you're at war, and it's just the two of you, the same thing. You have to work together. Your lives depend on each other. You're going to tell each other everything, because I need to know how to handle you if you melt down, because I need you, right? I need you in the game. So we know that people with a shared purpose of, we survive together and we're going to survive. That's our vision. We're going to make money. We want to make money together, right? We're talented. People who have a shared purpose and shared vision are able to work together in the long run, as long as they have that vision and that shared purpose, as long as they have an equal partnership, shared power and authority. You can't, I can't, right? Doing anything to you is going to affect and hurt me. If it hurts you, I can't get out of that. So it's a different mindset. It's a different orientation, that together we rise, together we fall. Then when that happens, couples can actually do pretty much anything they want. They can do anything they want. All they have to do is agree. So you and I want to stop a habit. We can say, okay, we're going to stop this habit. Do we give each other permission to enforce this? Yes. With the understanding that when I enforce it, you stand down. You're going to cooperate. We'll get there faster together than we could ever do it alone, because we both want the same thing.
That's very interesting. So maybe I'll share an experience I had many years ago. I went into a very rural community in Mozambique, and we had to go and negotiate with this community to go and build a smelter close to them, aluminum smelter. And so I walked into this community. It's very, in Western terms, basically nothing. So no running water and electricity. Interestingly enough, the homes were built like little mud huts in a circle around a fireplace, or what you can see is the kitchen, if you want to call it that. and one thing that struck me was the order and the happiness that I saw. So really, really interesting, and it was palpable. You could actually feel that. So we negotiated, did all the right things in terms of what we believe the right things are. So bought the land, moved people, built houses, running water, electricity, each one own kitchen, separate homes. I went back 4 or 5 years later into that community, and I saw a totally broken community. And so in Western terms, you had electricity, you had running water, schooling, money, jobs, but a broken community, unhappiness, palpable. And I just wonder, because you talk about this shared purpose as so important for a relationship. And if you then look at a community, maybe that's also what was, they work together every day for survival. It was, everyone had a role to play, and we all had a shared purpose to do something. And then in the more modern world with own homes, own kitchens, that's, every single family ended up with their own purpose, and not as a collective anymore.
Siloed.
Siloed, yes.
Yeah, and also I wonder that a communal kitchen area, the conversations that you would have every night, because it's one communal kitchen area, yes, where everyone, you could solve problems and you could talk together and you can work out what it is we want to do. So I was just wondering if what you're talking about, if you think that that's some of the similar relationship around purpose as the core.
Purpose, but also community, and community can fragment if they don't have a shared purpose. You can see it in any community. You can see it all over right now. If you take a look at what's happening in the United States, because there's a lack now of leadership, and a lack of that leadership creating a common purpose, a common vision. What's exposed now are the lies. Like all people are created equal, which is an obvious lie as played out. People start to civil war. Families will start to civil war. Communities will start to civil war. That's because we become more aware of our differences. We become more aware of that you're an other. You don't see things as I see, and because there's no unifying sense of us, right, that pulls us together, and so we'll tribalize by maybe even this is silly, but by sports team, by the colors we wear, by the cars we drive, by who we vote for, right? So this idea of community is important when the community has a reason for being. And that there's leadership. There has to be some kind of leadership, if any kind. And that doesn't mean might or right. That means leadership in terms of finding where people are the same and where people agree. That's leadership. That's leadership, right? It's very easy for us to find where we disagree and where we're different. It's low-hanging fruit. We've always been able to do that. And that's an easy thing. Socially, emotionally, it doesn't take a lot of intelligence. What does is to get consensus. How can I get you on board with what I want to do? I have to find where you're the same as me and where you agree. And that's not that hard to do. It really isn't. It is hard when it starts to go haywire, right? When people silo too long, they drift, right? I worry about couples many times where they're in the distancing group in the attachment area, and they're too comfortable with distance, too comfortable with what they call independence and autonomy, which sometimes is a disguise for neglect in childhood. They think it's autonomy, but it really isn't. I'm accustomed to having my alone time, and they'll just drift without knowing. And we know that partners that aren't with each other a lot physically, aren't doing things together a lot, will be influenced by outside forces, and then they drift, and then suddenly one person becomes a Buddhist and the other person didn't know, and they're done. So it's being together and finding ways of staying together, right? How can I get you to come to this party where you loathe these people? You don't like these people, but I have to be there and I want you to be there. Well, there's a way for me to get you on board. Instead of doing the lazy thing, well, you just stay home and you do your thing and I'll do mine. Mm. Right? That's not pro relationship. That's too pro self. So it's a different way of thinking that keeps family together, that keeps community together, that keeps, right, but without strangling it, right? Without possessing that, right? So and that's what happens in early attachment. In early attachment, there's no clutching of a child's need to cling and to be dependent, and there's no clutching of a child needing to stray or to be independent, right? A child is naturally being able to explore the non-caregiver's world without consequence other than the environment, but not from the caregiver. So the child always has a secure base and is able to reliably depend fully and to be independent. That's the same thing in adulthood, that we are interdependent, the two of you, I would say, interdependent if you have the same things to gain and the same things to lose. That's interdependence. Codependence is that you have more to lose than I, right? Or you think you do. Therefore, it's imbalance. You don't have the same power. So interdependence is we have the same things to gain, same things to lose. Therefore, we're two generals. We're two bosses. We're two authorities. We're two leaders. We're two executives. You can't tell me what to do any more than I can tell you what to do unless we both agree to tell each other what to do when necessary. All of that's done by agreement and permission. That's awesome, right? But then you have to take the role. You have to take the role and both be generals, right? And that's hard to do also, to get people who in their family of origin, wanted somebody else to do that and they be just passengers. And that doesn't work in adulthood. So it's a different system here. And what I want for people like the two of you, for us, Tracy and I, is both longevity and happiness, not just longevity. And the only way to do that is to play it always fair, just, mutually sensitive as the other person experiences it, not that I experience it. If you say that was unfair, it was. I can't say, well, no, it wasn't. Or that what I did hurt you. You said it hurt you. I didn't do anything. I can't say that in this world, right? I have to care about your perception if I want the relationship to exist. And that's hard for us humans to do.
Yeah, it is hard for us to do. And so when it comes to, those moments where you haven't yet figured out your agreements, right? Or maybe you have, and I'm sure that it's quite a natural human nature like thing to make an agreement and then not always keep your agreement. So that happens. You start arguing and fighting. I think at least human nature for me, the default seems like it's that fight to flight or going into survival mode, which, going back to what you said before, is like a very selfish, I-centric thing. How is it that
it's selfish, but we have to remember it's driven by a survival instinct. Therefore, it does not care. We just have to understand that's all of us. When we get there, we do not care about anything but our preservation. And so you have to make sure I don't get there. I have to make sure you don't get there. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, well, and I guess maybe you answered that, because what I was going to say is, how is it that we can teach people, and I would imagine it's a bit of a practice, to argue in such a way that it's in service of the we in the relationship? And I think you started to address it with, we just need to make sure we don't get there.
It's a practice.
Yeah.
So if I'm dealing with you, sir, and we're in a stressful situation, because this is about stress. We're in a stressful topic. I'm going to make sure that we're face to face and eye to eye in close proximity. Why? because we're visual animals, and our error correction is mostly from the visual field. We make too many errors if it's just audio. So I'm going to keep my eye on you, because if you show the slightest tilt towards unsafety, I'm going to restore you, because if you go down, game over. I depend on you being okay and feeling safe with me. Otherwise, I can't influence you. I can't. Mm-hmm. As soon as you start to feel unsafe with me, your brain produces what's called glucocorticoids. And glucocorticoids change the brain in such a way that you stop caring about my interests. You will not reach over the aisle. You will start to protect your interests. You will start to go by your own personal narrative, which is your reality based on your interests, not mine. And I will do the same. And that's when we square off, right? I'm going to only think about myself, and you will get that message. You will be compelled to do the same. And this happens like that. And now we can't influence each other. It's not possible until we're relaxed and safe again. If we don't know better, we won't do that for each other, and we'll just go off the rails every time. So it is a practice. I have to keep my eye on you as I talk. And if your face goes south, I have to go, did I do that thing again? I'm sorry. I'm not gonna do that thing you think. It's gonna work out. It's gonna work out. I'm not gonna screw you. You're going to get what you want. Okay. And I'm gonna get what I want. So that I'm taking care of you and myself at the same time. That's the formula. Negotiators know how to do this. A lot of people trained know how to do this. We all have to learn how to do it, because it's the human condition. As soon as I work on you, as soon as I turn from the problem to you, it's war every time. And this has been a great part of my research, studying what faces do, what the body does, what voices do, how there are slight changes in the eyes and the pupils and the blood flow in the face as soon as people start to feel threatened. And if the other partner isn't taking care of that, they're going to walk away with nothing, except more memory, threat memory. And this is just the way, it's not personal.
Yeah.
This is all of us. This is all of us. All of us.
Yeah. And
so we have to learn how to do this.
That's and how long does it take to learn that? Is it a practice you can pick up in a couple of weeks, or is this something you need to spend lots of time on?
Well, it's a practice your whole life, because secure functioning is hard for me. Tracy and I have a principle that we can go to bed angry, but we have to at least touch toes. And that was thought.
I love that. I'm so sorry. I love that so much.
Well, but it's actually based on science and biology. We thought it through. The reason for the touching toes is that us primates, we go through an existential crisis when there's a breach in the relationship. If we fight, there's a part of us that actually panics and thinks that the relationship may not exist tomorrow. And so that's really bad for our health and for our mental health and for the relationship. And so that's suffering. So instead of suffering, right, the touch signals unequivocally that I may be angry with you, I may hate you right now, but we're okay. We're okay. That's the minimal, and that is sufficient to sleep through the night well, and actually to just relax, because that's all we need. That's all we need, because we start to get into our thing of, I'm right and you're wrong. So that happened one night, and Tracy just fell asleep, because she falls asleep easily. And I was so mad. I wanted to punish her. This idea of touching, no. So it's hard to do because of our hubris as humans, right? We believe our memory is correct. We believe our perceptions are right. We believe we're actually we're being clear. It's all wrong, by the way. But we get stubborn and righteous. And so we have to rise above that and realize we based this on the best thing we could do, not what would be easy. And so I remembered that this was the best thing we could do. We went through all the reasons why it's the best thing. And so I did it. Immediately felt wonderful. I actually took her hand and squeezed it. I felt wonderful. All of it dropped. And I felt really good about myself because I managed to override a very primitive part of me by doing the right thing when it was the hardest thing to do. So people have to start to experience this, that it's all upside. When we plan ahead in our sober moments, what's the best thing we could do in this or that circumstance? Now we're into moral languaging. The best, the right thing, what would be good, like a good life. We can come to an agreement and decide that it shall be done. That's what we'll do because it's based on a purpose, not a feeling. Therefore, we have to do it regardless of how we feel. And therefore, it gets done. That's a good life. That's a good life. So all of this is set as you go. You're like clay, you're constantly shaping it and modeling it to your delight, not somebody else's. The two of you, this is your culture. And you're constantly shaping it as you go because you're moving through time. And it's based on a purpose. So let's say the two of you decide we're going to do loving, affectionate, romantic, appreciative things for each other throughout every day, the way the other person wants it. Right? Because we believe that's a good thing to put in there, right? We're just going to do it. The question is, do we do it when we're angry with each other? The answer has to be yes. Do we do it when we hate each other? The answer must be yes. So in all cases, it must be done. That is better than a poke in the eye because that guarantees that the good things that we want to keep are going to happen no matter what. The bad things that we want to stay away from are going to happen no matter what, because I can't do this even if I feel like I want to do it, because that would be self-destructive. Because if I break that principle that I believe in, that means you can, and then I'm dead. So that's the idea of interdependence, is that we're held by the same purpose-centered principles because our survival and our thriving depend on it. Actually, absolutely depend on it. We don't have that contract with other people. And to be sure, the universe is, the environment is not going to obey. When the chips are down, that's when we find out people are going to take care of their interests. Only you and I have an agreement to ride or die, and we're going to protect each other at all points. So it's not that hard. If people want to take a look at a list that we come up with, we protect each other in public and private at all times. Right. What that means is that if you felt I embarrassed you in public, I don't argue with that. I don't say I didn't do anything. I respect that. I apologize. I find out what it is, and I make sure that does not happen again, because I don't want you doing that with me. That's how we roll. We repair any injuries, misunderstandings within 30 minutes. By repair, I mean we don't litigate. We don't go back and rehearse the whole thing. We apologize for our part sincerely, without anything else. I did that because you apologize, and then we perhaps come up with a guardrail for the next time. Like, I'm obviously doing this automatically because I'm an idiot and I'm automatic like everybody else. I'm going to do it again, not because I'm evil, but because I don't remember. It's reflexive. So I'm going to give you permission to stop me, remind me, prompt me, cue me with my pledge that if you do, when you do, I will cooperate. I will yield. So that takes care of it. I have to employ you because we're brilliant animals, but we're also really stupid. We're on automatic throughout every day, about 99% of the time, mostly, which means we're not thinking. So I'm going to do the same stupid things. Therefore, I'm going to give the reins to you. cue me, prompt me, remind me. All I have to do is back off or change my tone or go, sorry. That works. That works.
Yeah. I can see that would work. And I have to tell you, to be honest, I was taking notes. I thought our relationship was pretty good. And I was like, well, these are definitely some key takeaways over here.
Our relationship to be great. And it is a practice because we're animals. We just are, and hit us at the wrong time, hungry, overtired, a lot of sound, a lot of noise, and we'll all act badly. So plan for your devils, folks. Don't just plan for your angels. It's wise, it's smart, predict each other, plan for what could go wrong, put those in place. And what you're doing is you're assuring, or you're keeping interpersonal stress, which is a killer, at a low, really low hum, and you're making the relationship easier. And then you'll see you free up all these resources that are being used for threat, which takes up a lot. And now you have all these resources to do amazing things together. And this is not a fantasy, by the way. This is actually true.
Yeah. And in speaking about threat, so I know that you had another book just come out, In Each Other's Care, and it's a guide to the most common relationship conflicts and how to work through them. Can we talk, I know we're coming up on time, but can we talk a little bit about threat and trauma in a relationship and the impact of it on a relationship?
Well, I wrote that book during during COVID, and I was going through my own crisis during that time as a healthcare professional, relegated to doing Zoom calls and experiencing people coming apart, and so I shifted from my usual in writing to this book, dividing it by common complaints. And then driving home really 2 points that unless and until partners start to really build a structure of their own and not be lazy and shiftless by just assuming we'll just do it at some point, that without the structure, no union will last on the planet, right? We have to know why we are and what's our point. And it can't be love and it can't be the kids. It's got to be the couple. So that I'm driving home again and again. And then the other is taking seriously the manner in which you and I will interact when one or both of us is under stress. It's not pretty if we're not skilled, if we don't understand how the mind works and how people work. And if that isn't done, also, it's not going to last. So that's that book. And you would ask, by the way, just to answer the question, you can set up a timer, a 20-minute timer, and get into an area of importance, a stressful topic. Give yourselves 20 minutes. I would give you 5 minutes in my office, but you have 20 minutes to come up with a solution for now that you both are happy with, or try again later, because that's the practice. It's a sport. You have to be able to quickly move through stress and get to mutual relief as quickly as possible, because stress is not a neutral state. It's going to count against your safety and security. So you have to move skillfully and quickly to mutual relief. There's a whole bunch of skill sets there. Not talk about the past, because you'll never get out of an argument about memory. Memory is terrible. Not over describe, because you'll indict your partner and go, what do you mean by that? And now you won't get out of that. So there are all these different pitfalls known, period, that no matter where you are on the planet, who you are, you'll fall into, not to get into, and you can learn how to be really good together at taking care of problems like that, off the table, next, off the table, and to come to decision-making together quickly, and there's nothing like it. So you can practice that. Okay, back to the other question. What was it again?
Okay, so I was asking you about trauma.
Oh yeah.
I just shared, I was divorced in the past, and it was a very traumatic relationship. And so I definitely personally, and this is a bit personal with he and I, but I have these like triggers for myself, right? That it just sets me off. And irregardless of this shared purpose that we have, and we do work really hard at keeping that in existence, there are still moments of, trauma triggers. And so is it possible really to move past those triggers, and how is it that you can do so, especially if you're in a new relationship?
Okay, so the first principle is that you have to study each other as you would your baby. You have to know the animal that you bought and purchased. To not know the animal and work well with that animal, I'm putting it in that frame, and to be able to work with that animal without using a stick or a whip is just incompetence. So partners must be competent at each other, not themselves, at each other. So first, I have to know these things. I have to know how to work with you, and what will trigger you. I have to understand it. And I have to talk for you, not for myself. I have to move for you, not for myself. I have to remember that. And if I forget, then of course I make it right. I repair that quickly. So first and foremost, I have to be an expert on you. I have to be curious. In this relationship, you're not family. Remember that. You are strangers. You're family with your kids because you're blood, but this is strangers. You're strangers constantly trying to get to know each other. That's a lifelong endeavor. It's a career. So you're curious, and I have to be really good at you. So I'm learning, and I'm practicing in my head. How could I not do that again? Not how could you not do this again? Don't do that, folks. The job is I have to think, what could I do next time that would change the outcome, not what you could do. People make a mistake in doing it. You're in my care. You're in my care. I'm responsible for your reactions. That's how this works. You're responsible for my reactions. I'm in your care. We know psychobiologically we're wired for this. This is what changed my world in terms of couples. It's this way. We're wired for in each other's care, not our own, in this game. Maybe in other unions, not, but in this one, yes. So it's a constant learning, and that's how we heal each other. We're hurt by people, we're healed by people. And because the two of you are proxies for everyone that came before, those people are gone. You have to take responsibility for what other people did. There's nobody else. You could outsource it to a therapist, but why? Yeah. The two of you are 1 degree of those people because of memory. So most people are going to step in and make it worse. That's most people. I don't know about your trauma. Your reactions are threatening to me. Therefore, I shoot you. And I'll double down. You will double down. But if we know better, then we can use it for understanding and for healing. And I know that you're scared, and I know what to do to lower your threat or to relieve you right now, which relieves me because we're connected. Where you go, I go. Right.
Yeah. The potato sack.
Right. The potato sack. That is, if anybody wants to think about that, ask yourselves, would you even get off the starting line with your partner?
Yeah.
Probably not. Yeah, probably wouldn't. And that's a problem on both of you. That's both of your fault, not either of you. So it's a learning, and that's the, trauma memory never goes away. Our early injuries to the self never really go away, but we are protectors of each other's injuries, and it does calm down quite a bit. But this thing about memory being memory isn't going to be erased until we start to lose our minds, which will happen. We don't want that to happen yet.
Yeah, no, we don't want that. That was very helpful.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
So being in each other's care is not just a saying. neurobiologically, it makes sense in these relationships. I could go through the science and why that is true. And it's hard to convince people because we're in the West, we're too embedded in our independence, and we just don't see the forest from the trees.
It actually explains so much of why, not just in one to two people relationships, but why teams don't work, and why communities don't work. Because you can see this, because as a leader of a team, you're not the boss, you're just actually taking care of those in your team, and they're taking care of you.
Yes. It's all solvable, but I think understanding leadership is parenting, understanding leadership is partnering, understanding leadership is really everything. It really is. It's being an adult. And I'll say one other thing. Secure functioning can only be achieved if both partners are able to tolerate pain, able to tolerate disappointing, because all people are disappointing, able to grieve loss. Those three things have to be there. Otherwise, people will play unfair. People will just resort to one person thinking of me, my, I. And that's just always unfriendly in a collaborative, right? We just have to understand that. And so, again, it's a practice, but then life is, and relationships is a practice, but we need them. And we know that in the end, that's all that matters to any of us. What do we do to crash and burn our relationships, and did we preserve them? That's what's important. So
that's all very helpful for me personally, and I know for anybody that would be listening, whether it be they've gone through trauma or in a new relationship or are married or team dynamics. And so we really appreciate the time here. And I know we're wrapping up. I've got one last question, and it's a question we ask all of our guests. We have been recently intrigued by the notion of superpowers, those things that are just so innately you, and sometimes you see them, and when you do and you unleash them, it really allows for maximum performance and fulfillment in one's life, and some you don't see that other people see inside you. I would love to know what your superpower is.
I thought about that, and it just changed just now. My thinking on it. I think I have a passion for synthesizing, taking things, square pegs that don't fit into round holes, and making them somehow work. That's been the whole process of my developing a polytheoretical approach, which is all these disparate pieces coming together for one unified purpose, and that is secure functioning, which is a doable, shared capacity of holding by principles of fairness, justice, sensitivity, and collaboration. And so I think I have that. I think there are other things that I'm able to do, but I got to tell you, I'm so aware of what an idiot I am and all the deficits I have. I swear. I mean, I am just a moron in so many areas. And my wife has that other part, her superpowers, and we work together as a team. Awesome. But God forbid anything should happen to her, because I'll just melt in the room. I'm just drool and, yeah.
That's very interesting. So from my point of view, when I say even we've been exposed to one another for an hour, I think one of your superpowers that I can see is that you can conquer complexity. So you a simplifier. So for me, that is, and to me, that's a big compliment, because there are not a lot of simplifiers out there in the world.
It's probably because I'm a worrier and I'm a very anxious person, and I perseverate. I obsess until I get it. I just do. I obsess over a problem until I understand it.
That is nothing as gracious as a simple solution. So,
yeah. Well, that's what teaching does. Teaching is a blessing. I don't know if the two of you are teaching, but teaching is the best way to learn anything. Yeah. And that is the greatest thing, because I can learn something and then teach it and start to integrate it in myself. So I recommend that people learn and teach.